Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I think we've had a tremendous event so far. Congratulations to the team for putting together these incredible panels. It's been very enlightening. And so I'm delighted to continue the great discussion that we're having. So I work with the Hispanic Federation. I am the Senior Vice President for Institutional Development for Hispanic Federation and work closely with our teams to really promote the work that the organization is doing. We have over 600 community-based organizations that are members of Hispanic Federation, and we're currently in 42 states and territories, including Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The big initiatives for us on the digital front include our digital equity centers. There are now 48 locations across the country where we're providing job training, digital skill sets, helping folks connect to the internet, and to get those certificates in IT and other types of digital skills that help them get great workplace opportunities. And the impact has been amazing. We've had some great success stories with people who've actually been able to triple their salaries after an 8-month certificate program, getting the types of skill sets that companies are really seeking in today's economy. We also are proud beneficiaries of the Affordable Connectivity Program outreach grant. And we're going to be working with, of course, our HTTP partners to spread the good word about this amazing program to help people connect to broadband. And we'll be doing in-person trainings to actually help people connect on the spot. So we're super excited about this initiative because it's so important for folks to have connectivity, as we've already discussed today, in order to be able to benefit from all the great things that are available online. Another great project that we have coming up is to help continue the Affordable Care Connectivity Program, because we know that this is really a very important and vital program for our communities. And as we look at the funding for it, the participation rates have been very impressive, but the funding will run out sometime next year, and it's important for Congress to provide additional funding to keep this great program going. If you think about the worst case scenario, that the funding is stopped, we know that lots of folks will lose their broadband connectivity, and lots of folks in our communities will suffer. So we're working this coming week. We've got Hill visits. Our advocacy day for ACP have over 30 Hill visits. About 65 advocates will be coming into Washington to really talk about this important program and ensuring that members of Congress realize how much benefit that folks are getting out of the Affordable Connectivity Program, and the really imperative that we need to keep it. These are just a few of the things that we're doing in the digital space, and we're working closely with our partners on HTTP. We've got a great group of organizations that are working on these initiatives to make sure that our communities really are realizing the best things that are online. Now, one of the big issues, of course, that has really captivated our community's attention, but also the national attention, is artificial intelligence. We've already kind of heard some commentary today that there's so much promise. There's so many opportunities that AI can bring to our communities, whether that's helping people with job applications, whether it's providing more in-depth tutoring and helping teachers to be able to really provide individualized content, to providing all types of services and benefits that Americans and our community included need to have. Now, so there's such excitement. If you're not elated by the opportunities that AI brings, you're missing something. But at the same time, there's some serious concerns, and it all comes down to making sure that our communities are included, and that not just in the being recipients of AI, but actually being part of at the table when we talk about the direction of AI, both the policy affecting AI, but also the content that's being included in AI. It's not lost on us that a lot of the current models are being trained on content that isn't very inclusive. So we need to do a lot to try to ensure that our community is fully benefiting from it. And then of course, there are some downsides to AI as well. We're concerned about how it could impact misinformation, or how it could impact even just outright fraudulent efforts to try to deprive members in our community of funding and money. So that's something that we have to be vigilant about to make sure that we're addressing. So when we were looking at putting this Digital Inclusion Summit together, Judan and I thought that this would be a really important topic to address because, it's the responsibility of HTTP and our member organizations to ensure that the Latino community is fully conversant in policy matters that are impacting our community and technology, but also that we are participating in the policy formation and really ensuring that our voice is heard as these important discussions take place. So it's my great pleasure to be able to introduce our next panel. And we have brought some really incredible content experts here today to talk to you about AI, what the status is, and what our community is going to be, how our community is going to be impacted. So could you please help welcome Suzanne Gonzales, who is the founder and CEO of AIandYou, and a member of the National Artificial Intelligence Advisory Committee to the President. Suzanne, thank you so much for being here. Suzanne and I have worked for many years, and she was reaching out to me really almost a decade ago saying, hey, you really got to start looking at AI and the importance of how it's going to be impacting the Latino community. So we're so delighted to have Suzanne here. What she was predicting has finally come to pass here. And so it's great to have her kind of helping guide us.
And it's Susan, by the way, we're such good friends.
Susan, so sorry, Susan. And Dr. Karla Badillo-Urquiola, who's the Assistant Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Notre Dame. Thank you so much for being here. Foremost expert on AI, and we're excited to hear her comments. And then also, please welcome Zaki Barzinji, who's Senior Director of Empowered Communities at Aspen Digital. Aspen's been doing incredible work to help guide the discussion on AI, and so we're super excited to have you here as well today. Thank you so much. And with that, we'll let the panel get started. Go ahead.
Thank you. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, great. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope you all are still awake. As was mentioned, welcome to our session on the future of artificial intelligence. It feels like that title has to be said in a very dramatic way, so I apologize. My name is Zaki Barzinji, and I'm the Senior Director of Empowered Communities at Aspen Digital, which is a program of the Aspen Institute. I lead our work at the intersection of emerging technology, equity, and justice for underserved and marginalized communities. And I'm really honored to be here at such an important event, hosted by such an amazing organization, HTTP. In a second, I'll invite my fellow panelists to share their far greater expertise than I. But I just wanted to say a few brief words to frame our conversation today. I mean, as you've already heard throughout the day, and as you just heard, AI is at the top of everyone's mind. And more specifically, how AI impacts marginalized communities like our own. I can tell you from my perspective at Aspen, I'm always trying to raise money for our programming. Every funder, every tech company we approach, they always say, what are you doing on AI? We only want to give you money for AI. And then we ask them, okay, what do you want us to do about AI? They're like, we don't know, just do something about AI. We'll give you money for it. And so everything that we do, we have to kind of shoehorn AI into it because it's such a hot topic, even though nobody quite knows where to begin. When it comes to the explosion of, in particular, generative AI, we've been promised a radical new future, right? Those innovators who are at the forefront of emerging technology portray it as a bright future that dramatically enhances the way we work, create, and connect with each other. And in many ways, they're probably right. But if those who are building that new future, even if they have the best of intentions and the most solid of ethics, remain as homogenous as they are now, if our communities are not a part of building that future, then how can we expect it to truly serve us, our communities? How can we ensure that the systemic barriers our communities already are facing won't just be made 1,000 times worse for future generations? In other words, how can innovation led by a few lead to a future that truly serves and benefits all? Those are just some of the questions that we're going to be discussing today, especially when it comes to AI. So I will now pass it on to my fellow co-panelists to give some introductory remarks, and then I will pepper them with questions, whether they like it or not. And so we'll start with Susan.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so I feel like I'm at home. I see some old, and I mean old friends, and we know how far back we go. When I used to be out here in DC, I spent about 10 years out here a long time ago, but I went back to the Bay Area years ago. And I went back because my parents were aging at the time, but also to join Facebook, which was an early company. It was a young company at the time. And it was about 8 years ago that I learned about this new thing called artificial intelligence. And I was on the policy team. And I thought it was so cool because this new technology was allowing the blind community to access our platform. And I just became so curious about it. And I would always like stay on top of it with the engineers. And I found myself saying all the time, oh, so what you mean is, like in plain English, not engineer talk. And so then about 5 years ago, actually, I decided to leave the company after spending about 5 years there to pursue my own thing in AI. And I got quickly immersed in the AI ecosystem. And I was invited up to the largest global gathering of AI leaders in Montreal, Canada. There were probably, 15,000 people. About 14,050 or 500 of them were men. And they were white and Asian men. I saw no Latinas, one who was launching Latinx and AI that year. And so I started thinking about it, and I thought, you know what, rather than me consulting with these AI startups, I need to do something differently. Because I realized that the AI ecosystem was over here. And then the rest of us were over here. And there was nothing in between. And so that's what Brent is talking about, because he's always been my tech guy in our community. I'm like, Brent, I'm telling you, there's something here with this AI thing. And so on a long bike ride once, my dad had passed away, and I was in my grief, and I was like riding, and I was crying, and I was riding, and I was crying. And then I thought, my dad's the one that both my parents taught me about giving back to my community. And so with that, I just started praying about it. And I said, I know there's something I can do here. And the idea came to me at that moment to start a nonprofit called AIandYou, very simply. So that was about 4.5 years ago. And let me tell you, I have gotten a lot of pats on my head for the first 4 years until like the last 8 months, right? Of, oh yeah, whatever you're doing. Except Brent would always listen to me. He knew what I was talking about. And so finally now, here we are, right? And then it was interesting because a couple years ago, right after the president was elected, I heard that he was going to create a national AI advisory committee. And I was like, I have to be on that. I have to be our voice. And it was our community. It was Javier Becerra. It was my Senator Padilla. It was Ben Ray Lujan, the former CHC chair. I called upon all of them. I'm like, I need your help to get me on that committee. And so I've been on the committee. I am the only voice for marginalized communities on the committee of 26. In fact, ironically, we're meeting right next door at the Willard, where I'm on break. And that is proving to me, again, how important representation is, especially when it comes to this topic of AI. So more to come on that. Some really exciting things coming, and I'll follow up with you guys in a couple months when we release some new things that I think you will find super fascinating that impact our community. So bottom line is that's what led me to where I am today. And I know we'll be addressing different topics, and I'm so great to hear about the digital work at the Aspen Institute that you guys are doing specifically with marginalized communities. And I specifically chose AIandYou to educate and engage marginalized communities about the benefits, risks, and opportunities of AI. Very specifically. That's our goal. That's our mission. I heard from somebody from Germany not too long ago, and she said, Susan, you're literally the only organization I could find in the world doing this. And now I'm having conversations with the UK consulate, like, hey, we can, mirror this education. So we'll talk more about that, but that's what I've been doing. So it's so great to be back.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Karla Badillo-Urquiola. I am a professor at Notre Dame University in Indiana. This is actually my birthday today. Yeah, thank you. I hope you all sing me the mañanitas. No, I'm kidding. But I hope that shows you how important this topic is to me because I'm spending my birthday with all of you. But I am a new professor at the University of Notre Dame. This is my second year there. I got my undergrad, master's, and PhD at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. I actually got my bachelor's in psychology. So I am a social scientist at heart, living in a computer science world. And that's actually what my research lab focuses on, is bridging the human and the computer. My discipline is human-computer interaction, and my research lab is called the EPIC Research Lab, so empowering people, organizations, and communities through human-computer interaction. And so a lot of my work is centered on understanding the stories of people and their value systems, and how we can bring those stories and those values into the design of technologies. I focus on marginalized communities, so my dissertation research focused on youth in the foster care system, looking at online safety and privacy for them. And then now I'm doing a lot of work in the global South, Latin America and Africa contexts, looking at how we can understand AI values in those contexts and bring them into conversation at events like these, and then also in the research where the conversation is dominantly Western, white, high-class conversations. And so I'm really excited to be here with you guys because I think more conversations like these are needed where we bridge policy, academia, research, and industry together.
Thank you both so much for your tremendous experience and giving us those opening thoughts. Let's jump into the conversation. I think that there's a general, maybe palpable sense of apprehension around AI and its impact on our communities. I don't know that many of us know for sure the specific dangers or threats that we could be facing as marginalized communities from the future of AI. What would you all say are, among the top concerns that we should be thinking about that maybe we aren't thinking about, enough?
Yeah, I'll start that. I think we need to start with the basics. And what I am encouraging at a national and global level is the concept of AI literacy, meaning a basic understanding of what it is. Because a lot of the fear is coming from a lack of understanding. And again, this is the premise of my organization, right? So if you go to AIandYou.org, I promise you in 10 minutes, you're gonna walk away and be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. All in simple English and Spanish, very simple. But that's where we need to start. Because if our communities don't understand what an algorithm is, what a deep fake is, someone recently said, well, Susan, what time did I start interacting with AI today? I said, well, what time did you pick up your phone? Did you use your face? Did you get online? That's the moment you started interacting with AI. You started creating a digital footprint. And it's not bad. It's not all bad, right? There are some not so great things, but there are some wonderful things happening, particularly in healthcare. But the point is that a lot of the conversation today, especially in Washington, which needs to happen, is very high level. Policy, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Should it happen? Shouldn't? But we need to be at sea level. Like, do you know what an algorithm is? Do you know what a deep fake is? Do you know how you interact with AI every day? That's what AI literacy is. So I think that I challenge everybody to keep coming back and asking yourself that. Like, do I really understand the fundamentals? Because how can we build upon that if we don't understand the fundamentals?
Yeah, I would echo that, that digital literacy is important. I'd also say that one of the things that you hit on was like who's in the room and who's left out. I think those are the two major conversations that are happening right now and that need to really be addressed because right now, even looking at this room, a lot of us here are advocates. We do this as a living. We do teach our communities, but is our community in the room? Is our policymakers in the room? That's where the issue is that even though we're having these conversations, a lot of the people that need to be at the table aren't. And so I think there needs to be more move into that area along with education.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify, digital literacy, yes. But digital literacy, the concept has been around for 30 years, and the curtain was pulled back during the pandemic, like we still have a big problem. What we're talking about is a new paradigm, AI literacy. That's very different, and that's what I challenge everybody to think about. The other thing regarding the policymakers, and I just want to just put this out there, sadly, we do not have, with the exception of Senator Lujan, who has always been interested in technology, and he is on the AI caucus, and he is now, in fact, I'm meeting with them, their stuff tomorrow, interested in getting more involved in AI. But there is not one CHC leader on the House side that is stepping up to be a leader in AI. Not one. Can anybody think of anybody? There just isn't. And that is unfortunate. There's leaders on KPAC, the Asian caucus. There's definitely a number of leaders in the Black caucus. But the question is, why is that? I don't get it. And, at the same time, speaking of policymakers, let's talk about AI literacy for policymakers. When I was up here a couple months ago, up on the Hill, and someone said, how can we expect all these policymakers to create AI policy when most of them don't even know how to log into Facebook? Right? So that's what we're dealing with. But when you bring it home, what about our leaders in the CHC? I think that's a question that we should be asking.
Karla, I think before we started this session, we had a little pregame before we got up here. And you were saying that perhaps sometimes the focus is more on the technology and the ethics maybe around the technology, when really it should be more about the human and the community and the ways in which they're being impacted. And that seems like a common sense thing to say, but it actually does represent a pretty major paradigm shift. Could you expand more on what you meant by that?
Yeah, so a lot of times, a lot of the fears is that, AI is out to get us, it's getting our jobs, it's creating these high-risk scenarios. But really what it comes down to is that we don't understand how AI actually works. So AI is built by people to mimic the human cognitive processes. So how we think is how AI typically is made to think, right? And so a lot of times, and we're having these conversations in my computer science department, is should we have an AI core course in computer science? And I actually push back on that. And I say, no, we shouldn't. We actually should have more humanistic courses in CS. Because if we can understand the psychological processes that happen in our everyday lives, like how people think, how data is curated, how it's created, how stories are passed on through generations, then that's where we'll find the fundamental truth of how we can develop a better future for AI. And so that's where that comment goes.
And let me just take off on one thing you mentioned about data, is in its very simplistic form, AI feeds off data. AI needs data to work. Who's the data? Where does the data? You are the data. We are the data. There is a reason, and it's, again, not all bad, especially in healthcare, but think about it. How is it that your favorite streaming service is recommending a horror movie? Because you keep clicking on horror movies. And it's learning, the AI is learning from your behavior. It's not learning your name and where you live, not maybe, but hopefully not, where you live. But it's learning from your behavior, so it's recommending a horror movie. And so I think the whole point about data is really important. Data can sometimes be the four-letter word in DC, on the policy front. But I mean, call it what it is. Like, It is what it is. That's the AI needs it. That's what AI works from and lives off of. And I do want to mention the people aspect. I think that's a really important piece as well. I don't know if you all are familiar, but a couple of months ago, Senator Schumer had a very closed-door meeting up on Capitol Hill, and it didn't go so well on the back end because there was some backlash that why is it so closed door, and it was very exclusive, et cetera. So I was watching all that take place, and then this point, to your point, Karla, about people. So I decided to launch, it's going to be the first time in the country, and I'm doing it with Senator Liu, who is the only member of the House with a computer science degree. Ironically, he represents a district I grew up in, ironically. So in a couple weeks, we're going to be doing the first AI in the community conversation. And it's open to the public. And the whole point is to have this kind of dialogue to help people understand. So I called a friend, high school friend, and I said, okay, what would make you want to come to this? Like, what would you need to see? She's like, I don't know. Is it like robots and stuff? And I was like, no. And I said, it's on your phone. You interact. She said, then put that in the ad. So we did. Did you know AI? Did you know you interact with AI when you're on your phone? Are you afraid of AI? Come and learn, the good, the bad, and the not so great. So I think that's a really good point, Karla, because these are the conversations that need to happen. I just read day before yesterday that the mayor of New York is starting AI listening sessions around the city to learn from the community about what is happening. And one last point, by the way, with NAIAC, the AI Advisory Committee for the President, I was able to create a stakeholder outreach. And Judan was one of those that participated on behalf of the Latino community on HTTP. It was incredible. We met with 4 different groups: civil rights, disabilities, the workers, the trade unions, and human rights, listening to everybody's different concerns. And so the premises of what I told the committee is we can't do this in a vacuum. Like, let's get information from leaders and let's let that be a part of our recommendations to the White House on what should happen. So thank you. It's a really important point.
Can we get a little bit more specific about the actual threats and concerns that you all have been hearing? For example, the listening session that you just mentioned. Karla, you also mentioned a lot of your research focuses on the global South and the concerns that they have. I'll tell you from my experience at Aspen Digital, we did a project with another Aspen program called Latinos in Society, which, as the name implies, focuses on Latino communities. And we brought the sort of the tech folks, they brought the community folks. And one example of a threat, a very specific threat, is this explosion of industry around what's being termed the digital border wall. In other words, a lot of major tech companies are literally setting up shop on the southern border to deploy AI technology, to deploy massive data, big data analysis and sharing to essentially. And it's being marketed as sort of a humane alternative or a more ethical alternative to the physical border wall, to the extent where some Democrats say like this is actually we can get behind a digital border wall because it's more humane and more ethical. What we heard from some of the people in our roundtable though was actually this is more insidious, more pernicious because it's a much more massive invasion of our privacies, and we don't know who's going to be in charge of this data. We don't know what type of AI is going to be applied to that data to profile entire populations of folks and target them in ways that they should never be targeted. I come from, I'm Arab American, South Asian American, and Muslim American. And during the Trump years, as many folks know, there was a lot of talk about the Muslim ban, which became the travel ban. At one point, Trump's administration was offering an alternative, which came to be known as the digital ban, the digital travel ban, which again was posited as a more ethical, humane, smarter way to filter who does and doesn't come into this country. But what it amounted to was a proposed system that would track anybody who fit a specific profile, who immigrated from anywhere in the world, whose social media accounts fit a specific profile, and it would be and a lot of data ethicists said that this is going to be a much more massive invasion of privacy and rights, but it's being marketed as a more humane, AI-driven approach to immigration law enforcement. So those are two examples that I've heard recently. Just curious from you all, first of all, if those are examples that you're thinking about as well, and then additional examples of specific threats that maybe help make it more real to our communities about why it is we should be caring about this and why it is we should be insisting on being in the room.
Yeah, so I actually just finished another panel this past weekend where we brought in youth with researchers to one of our conferences. It was one of the first panels at a research conference that actually had youth participants speaking on AI. And the title was The Future of AI Through the Lens of Gen Z. So we had college students and high school students talking about how do they see the future of AI? What are their concerns? But then also, what are their aspirations? Because I'm a very optimistic person too. And so I always think that we can't just talk about the concerns, because the only way that we can solve the concerns is to talk about the positives. And so some of the things that were brought up in that panel were very real conversations about surveillance and policing, and like even sort of the things that are happening in the world right now, like the attacks in Israel, and how AI is being used as a tool to do harm. And to do real harm against people. And so some of the concerns that they have is like, well, if we get a seat at the table and we talk to policymakers, or if we talk to researchers about our concerns, how are they going to use that against us if we're already marginalized? If we already don't have a voice? If we do speak up, how is that going to be used against us? And so sometimes the fear is even the solution, where we're saying, oh, we should have more seats at the table. Well, sometimes the seats, when we are at the seat, if there isn't really a substantive backing, like our voices are used against us. And so those were some of the harms that they were talking about. But then they also talked about, like I said, their aspirations. And some of the aspirations was, wow, like AI is really transforming our world. It's transforming how we educate people on technology. It's also transforming how we think about policies, because now it's creating more complexity in our conversations. Like the misinformation panel was saying, like, the way that language is important, it's transforming how we speak. So, yeah.
Well, I know I didn't catch the full misinformation panel, but the most immediate threat I see is the election. And if we look at the past elections, the Hispanic community had significant input into the outcomes of some elections. So one would have to conclude that our community is ripe to being targeted with misinformation, deep fake ads, fake letters that look like they're real, fake phone calls that sound like they're real, and all of the above. Because again, our communities could sway this election. So I think that that's another really important education piece that our communities need to understand. And so AIandYou, actually, we just launched AI in the 2024 election misinformation campaign. So again, if you go to the site, I'm telling you, click on the elections tab, and we have a glossary and a short video just explaining everything, like what's a deep fake and how does all this work. But I think everybody just needs to be, it's just about awareness, right? I'm not suggesting you need to study this so you can become a data scientist. That's not what this is about. This is about general knowledge. The thing that I'll be honest with you, that's most frustrating to me is that a lot of our community doesn't understand why it should matter. I cannot tell you how many times I have gone to organizations here and in California. Listen, I'm happy to come and have a panel or happy to speak. Oh, sorry, Susan, our agenda's full. And I told a Latino leader not too long ago, I said, she said, but we'll have you next year. And I said, you know what that's saying? That's like saying, the internet is here, everybody, but we'll talk to you about it next year. But because the leaders don't understand it. So it's trickling down. And yeah. So thank you, HTTP, for doing this.
I think one thing that both of you touched on is the reluctance, I guess you could say, of different stakeholder groups within our communities to engage on these issues. Young people often feel tokenized at best, and at worst, targeted. And at Aspen, for example, we've had a couple of like youth and tech roundtables where we've brought all the major tech companies and then a couple of young people. And like the tech companies were like vultures, just like descending on these young people. They were eager to hear the Gen Zers' thoughts, but it was so extractive. It was like, we want all of your information and thoughts so that we can, design AI to like take advantage of you more. And the young people afterwards were like, I don't want to be in here. You guys basically like, trotted us out here to be attacked. And they were right. So the question is like, how do we bring our communities into these conversations, but on a level playing field, so that it's not an extractive proposition. It's not about how can these communities contribute to an already broken system or an already flawed product. That shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be, how do we bring us into as equals into the co-creation process from the earliest stages of the development of these new products. And I'll use that to sort of move, with 5 minutes left, move us into more of like, I guess, the practical next steps and solutions when we think about how do we get our communities more involved? How do we get policymakers? How do we get tech companies? How do we get our actual communities themselves more aligned and more to a solid place of consensus?
So actually, as a community-based researcher, that's one of the things that I study, is how do we bring communities into the conversations. And a lot of times I say it's not just bringing the communities to us, but us going into the communities is really important. I don't remember which panel was that mentioned that staying at Capitol Hill is not gonna get you the real life stories of the people in our nation, especially because our nation is filled with multicultural people, multicultural experiences. I just moved from Florida to Indiana, and that was a total culture shock in itself. It's also beautiful because now I'm learning a new community and I'm learning new stories about my nation that I had not known before if I would have stayed in Orlando. And so I think it's not just bringing the communities to our conversation, but us being embedded within the conversations of our community and seeing, okay, how are they talking about AI? How are they experiencing it? And how does that fit in with my framework and my mental model of what AI is? And how can I bring that back into policy?
Right, and again, I would circle back to, it's all about AI literacy. So if you belong to an organization, whether you live here or somewhere else, ask your community leaders, when are we going to bring the AI conversation here to our community, to home? It doesn't have to be, and we didn't even dive into policy because honestly, there's plenty of people having policy conversation. This is a conversation that needs to be happening of like real stuff. This is like real impact on you. And that's what I would leave with, is that continually ask yourselves, like, well, where is my level of understanding? Where's my family's level of understanding? And how can we galvanize our community? Because that is how we are going to be left behind. For example, if our small business owners don't know that they can use new AI tools on their phone to improve their inventory management or to improve marketing, then guess what? They're gonna fall behind the business owner who knows how to do that 2 blocks down. It's that simple. Right? And if our kids don't know how to protect themselves with their privacy settings and how AI works, well, there you go. And I would just leave one last thing is, And it's not just about big tech, right? Because the big tech companies have massive vendors and respectfully in telecom and retail and all of that. It's not just about digital literacy. Digital literacy to date has been big companies, and I should know because I was one of them, funding organizations for digital literacy to teach you about my products. But we need to break away from that paradigm and be like, you know what? It's time for everybody to be on the level playing field and understand the AI basics. So those are questions to you to ask.
Well, Karla, Susan, thank you both so much for this amazing conversation.
You.
Thank you all for listening, and let's keep the conversation going. Appreciate it.